Welcome back to the Battle of Bull Run, the Bull Run campaign. We are in the final 3 turns of this game, and we are going to go through it right now. And then I'm going to give you my final thoughts on this epic campaign experience I've been having with Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, the All Green Alike module. But before we get there, we have got a real strong Confederate position, and they are about to take advantage. They won the first initiative. Beauregard is going to do an assault here on Schenck. The Confederates are getting +5. It's going to be a real nasty attack. And the ultimate goal here is for Beauregard to drive off Schenck, then transfer to Camp Pickens, where there is a ton of strength, I think 13 strength points here at the fortified camp, attack an out-of-supply Union Tyler here, and really just send Tyler's division scattered to the wind, and then eventually counterpunch and make their way across the river. Essentially try and drive the Union panic up as far as it can go, and hopefully get lucky and send them packing back to Washington, D.C. Well, Beauregard did a really good job. Forced Schenck back across the river. The losses weren't as good as they could have been because the Union artillery, again, coming through in a big way, but certainly he's out of the battle this turn. There was another attack launched on Tyler, and again, results not quite what the Confederates wanted, although they weren't terrible. They did do a manpower loss in there, but you know, Tyler's in a really bad way. The Union just won initiative. They want to move. He wants to get out of there. The problem is there's no roads connecting any of these hexes. He finds himself in a really bad spot. So if he moves, he's going to lose manpower off of each of his stacks, which is probably worse than just gutting it out and taking the attacks from the various Confederate forces. It at least keeps them pinned in this location, doesn't allow them to move back against the rest of the Union line on the other side of Bull Run. And, you know, he's taken one for the team. The Army of the Shenandoah forces under Johnston have not yet had a chance to go. Union got to figure out what they're doing. An absolutely crushing defeat for Tyler here. He was finally broken, and he was broken hard. Beauregard with an assault out of the camp. This force absolutely crushed him. He's out of supply. He's demoralized. He took 3 manpower losses. It was real ugly, and now Camp Pickens is secure. There are no Union troops on the west side of Bull Run, and it's going to be time for a Union counterpunch, especially because the panic level here, you can see the Union 2 points away from full panic. If the Confederates can find one more attack this turn, and I suspect that they will somewhere up here, especially because Hunter made an attack on this stack here. It did not succeed, really just succeeded in fatiguing them both. And Johnston now potentially has an opportunity. We might also see an attack here against McDowell's demoralized forces from Bonham. In general, all the momentum now with the Confederacy in the waning days of this campaign, and that's pretty historically accurate. Well, the rebels are feeling it right now. Johnston just launched an attack across this creek, an assault with his single unit, that's B there, and it was a resounding success. It drove Hunter all the way back into Loudoun County along these roads. Now the Army of the Shenandoah has pushed up here against this small garrison unit who's probably going to want to get out of there because these are all Army of the Shenandoah brigades. Yep, they're all Army of the Shenandoah brigades. They've basically taken control of the northern part of the river. And you've also got Confederate units here moving in against Centerville as well. And so the rout is on, and that is both literal and figurative, because with this attack and this rout result here, that has caused the Union Army to panic. That is going to be -10 victory points at the end of the game, which is going to be a huge hill that the Union's going to have to climb. And it has a couple of other knock-on effects as well. The Union now can actually go to fatigue 6, so it's special rules when they do marching, any kind of activity, they can go to fatigue 6. The other thing is that whenever they attack or defend, they get an automatic -1 to their dice roll, which is going to just essentially end their offensive operations. And then they can also do what's called a retreat march, I believe, something to that nature. But basically, they can all move back and try and exit the board this way, essentially, with some good modifiers for them in terms of not having to roll on the extended march table. They essentially pack it up and they go home. And that might be the smartest move for them right now, since they don't want to give any more victory points to the Confederates with manpower losses, and they certainly don't have the capability to attack anywhere. And they don't want to be standing around while the Confederates have their bloodlust up. So they are probably all going to head this direction, and we're going to see a very quick fleeing from the field of battle. And I will show you what that looks like as we get to the end of the turn here, because I don't see the Union potentially making any more attacks this turn. Well, here's where we are at the end of this turn, and as you can see, the Confederates have basically cleared out their neighborhood of the riffraff. In fact, Johnston's army is, pursuing pretty aggressively through the northern part of the river. On the south, the Union decided not to take advantage of their retreat movements. Instead, they remained dug in. They're basically trying to cover this retreat here. A lot of these units here tried to get out because they were not in a good position. They were pretty exposed given the amount of Confederate forces up here. You can see that some of them made it all the way back to Fairfax County Courthouse. And don't forget that the Union needs to hold that till the end of the game. They cannot let it fall. Otherwise, it's more victory points they will not get. You've got McCunn coming down from the north, potentially trying to shore up some of this stuff in here. You've got Confederate cavalry trying to surround Hunter. And Johnston's going to move out aggressively through here next turn. Basically, they want to march as quickly as possible onto Fairfax County Courthouse, however and wherever they can. Union going to try and slow them down, but they don't want to get too heavily engaged because they don't want to lose any more manpower given the victory points penalties they're suffering from. So that's kind of where we stand. Obviously, the complexion of this has changed. The tempo has changed quite a bit. Confederates are going to be pretty well positioned next turn. In fact, we might do a night march potentially. Well, we might hold back this upcoming turn and on the final turn do a night march, which may allow certain elements of these forces, especially up here, to get close to at least Fairfax County Courthouse on the final day. We'll see how it shakes out. But certainly Confederates in a great position going into the final home stretch, and I will bring it to you. To kick off this July 26th turn, the Confederates with 2 straight initiative activations. We had Beauregard, who is down here, who's moved out a majority of his division, trying to get them across the river as fast as possible. He was able to march here through Bethlehem Church and Newmarket, get across the island forward here, and continue moving with a great roll with 6 movement points here in the vicinity of Heintzelman, who is on top of this demoralized stack, who rebased basically from here. Beauregard with enough movement points left over to make a prepared attack as part of his movement against this stack, and he went ahead and committed to that because he had a bit of an advantage and ended up rolling here. This is a +2, so it's actually 6-1, which is a really devastating attack to Heintzelman's brigades that he's commanding there. And they're already demoralized, so this is going to go from bad to worse for the Union retreat, and the Confederates breaking through probably way quicker than the Union would have expected here as part of this retreat march. Misspoke, it wasn't Heintzelman, it was Tyler. But anyways, Beauregard managed to move swiftly across the river, decisively strike at him, force him all the way back to Fairfax County, which suits him just fine, but he has taken another level of demoralization that he's not going to be able to recover. He is effectively done as a fighting force. Took 2 more manpower losses. It's another 1,000 casualties to that stack. 1,000 converted casualties, right? 2 strength points is 1,000 men. Beauregard now here surrounding this breastworks stack here with Heintzelman, that's where Heintzelman was, who's trying to provide cover for this retreat, but now finds himself in a dangerously exposed position, and obviously the way across the river is open. This stack here hasn't even moved yet because of Beauregard's lightning fast advance, but he's got 6 movement points as well, and he's probably going to move up here with Beauregard, and then, all hell could break loose with an assault on this position potentially next turn, and that would just be more casualties potentially for the Union. Not going well for them right now. Pretty much a disastrous end of this campaign, and like I said, historically accurate. Still with a lot of initiative, the Confederates moving as quickly as possible. This Force 1 marker here, that's the Army of the Shenandoah for the most part. Other than this unit here, the entirety of Johnston's force is here trying to make an attack on this demoralized stack. There's only 6 strength points here. The Confederates have way more than that, enough to get 2-1 on that stack, who has no artillery value because of the demoralization. Unfortunately, they just rolled for the assault die roll, and again, Johnston unable to get his units to make the attack properly. That has been the story of the game on this northern flank. Just Johnston unable, I don't know if he has bad command staff or letters were soggy from the rain turn or what's going on, but just units not able to coordinate to make those attacks, and the Union getting very lucky because of that. It might be a different story right now. But as you can see, essentially the Confederates in half a turn have pushed the line, halfway back to Fairfax County Courthouse. So making lots of progress, and rolls for assaults notwithstanding, they are doing quite well. Here's the situation going into the final turn of the game. I'll take you up the line. Not a lot happening down south, just a lot of fortified positions looking at each other across the river. No one willing to risk what are exhausted armies at this point, who have been going for, 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that. And so just kind of staring each other down. No one wants to give the ground up. No one wants to reinforce elsewhere. Though there was one movement here where out of this hex, Richardson took Davies, who should not have that fatigue marker on him, and did march up in support of this fortified point here at Centerville. And one of the things that the game is doing here is actually showing me, let me focus on Centerville for you. Centerville's up here. One of the things that the game is showing me is how important the road network around Centerville is. There's just not an easy way for the Confederates to get through here, and that's why you've seen the Army of the Shenandoah up here come up north and try and attack Hunter for, to essentially commit some pursuit losses on the retreating army. But there's just no easy way to cut through this part of the map right here. None of the roads go east-west until you're way up in this area. And the main road, the main pike that comes through here, it goes through Centerville. So you can kind of see why the Union used it strategically as their HQ for this campaign. They controlled basically all access south and north coming out of that position. And so that's where we are here. Beauregard thought about making an assault. It's a 1-to-1 attack. It's not quite the odds that he would want. Realistically, in order for Beauregard to his whole division to get them to have success here, he's got to get another unit on the other side, or he's got to get a unit up here, and it has to be an infantry unit. It can't be a cavalry unit. So there might be some coordination going on here with Smith, who, if he can get enough movement points, could potentially come down up this way and come down this road to surround that position. That would help Beauregard make the breakthrough that he needs. But again, we're on the last turn, so I don't foresee any more progress being made there. The Union managed to cover their retreat quite nicely. A lot of these units here demoralized and severely weakened back at Fairfax County, but they're not really in any danger right now. It's going to be a really tough ask to get the Confederates across. Johnston did make an attack. Finally, he did get an assault off on this hex. It was really inconclusive. It basically just exhausted everyone involved. The Confederates took a manpower hit. Not great, but they're doing so well in terms of manpower. They've only got 12 losses versus the Union's 26, so more than double the casualties on the Union side. And in general, most of the action probably on this final turn is going to be up here, looking at Beauregard to make an attack. There's a unit here, Cock. He can come out and potentially do something. And this is Longstreet. They can also move up in support, but it's going to be tough for Beauregard to get. He's stacked already with 2 units, so he can't really get any more forces there in terms of making an attack. So again, the game's all about maneuver. He's got to maneuver a unit probably into this hex is the key hex. And, Richardson's trying to beat him there, but it's pretty tough because there's no road here, so he'd have to trek across the wilderness to get there. Should be a pretty quick, fast final turn, but obviously where we're looking now is quite a bit different from where we were even just 2 turns ago with the Union all the way down here. The Confederate pushback has been very swift and very effective. The other problem the Union's facing is they were counting on getting points from Loudoun County by controlling Leesburg up here, and they were in that position. Unfortunately, with the pushback here and the attack, you can see that the county line kind of goes like this. And right now, the Union needs to have 10 strength points of units in Loudoun County. And right now, they do not. McCunn, who is coming down to support, is on the wrong side of the county line. And realistically, he wants to be here to make sure that the modifiers for Johnston's army are not so heavy if he decides to make another assault. But if that happens, and with Hunter stuck here on this side of the county line, there's really no way for the Union to score these points unless Hunter moves deeper into enemy territory, which is kind of a gamey decision. At this point, this force is so exhausted, they would just want to get home. But, those are the rules of the game, and the Union needs all the points it can get. So, maybe a Pyrrhic victory if they can get these units here and hold out against Johnston's force. The one nice part about that is that if he goes here and Johnston is here, there's really no flanking bonus that he can get, and so he'll be disincentivized to attack. So it's a relatively safe move if Smith comes down this way and the Confederates think they want to try and crack this position. But I think the lower hanging fruit is this demoralized Hunter's division here, who's got, I believe, 6 strength points, 3. Yeah, they've got 6 strength points right now. It would be higher, but they're disorganized. So kind of a Sophie's choice there for them, for both sides, actually, to see what happens there. And that'll probably be, you know, these units here, these units here. That'll probably be the final word on this campaign. Really nothing to lose for the Confederacy to go for it. They just want to put some more points on the board, and that's what they're going to probably try and do. Well, one final hurrah to get some victory points here. Beauregard is going to make the assault on this fortified position here at Centerville against the Union. Smith from the Army of the Shenandoah did come down from the north. He was able to get in position here. This is going to be a pretty heavy cavalry modifier, despite the fact that Richardson was able to move in and back up the unit here. So we're going to make this assault roll. We'll see if it goes okay. Beauregard has a lot of force with him right now. I believe it's going to be a 10 versus 10 attack. There's only 5 Union units here, but obviously the breastworks is multiplying that by 2. So if you can get every unit to attack in there, that's going to be pretty decent with his tactical rating and the surrounding bonus. So we're going to do that now, and then I will come back after I roll it. Well, there was a success here. Beauregard again successful in dispositioning. Is that a word? Dispositioning Union troops. It was not as a crushing defeat as he would have hoped, given the modifiers. Roll was pretty close to even, but he did do it without taking any losses, and he did force Heinzelman's brigade here to retreat out of those fortified positions all the way back here towards Germantown. And no losses on either side, but some fatigue buildup, most definitely. In fact, this, is full fatigue. So the Confederates now consolidated. They've taken the Union HQ at Centerville. That's kind of a big deal. Maybe a moral victory, more so than a victory point victory, but still pretty good progress. And that's going to put an end to Beauregard's turn more than likely, unless he wants to make an assault here against Richardson. But Richardson has no reason to stick around. He could. Beauregard could potentially try and assault against him to do some more casualties, but I mean, there's really no risk to doing that. That's the final turn of the game. We'll see what happens. Union won initiative. Richardson did indeed back off from Centerville. No reason to stick around. They now have formed sort of a wall here in front of all of these demoralized Union units who are trying to regroup here back at Fairfax County, the seat of Fairfax County, which should prevent the Confederates from getting there. I don't think there's really a stack that can make that march. You know, obviously Beauregard could march out of here along the turnpike, but if he does that, he's going to be rolling some pretty severe penalties for an extended march on his troops. That would potentially cause manpower losses, is likely to cause manpower losses. There's no reason to throw away victory points. So the Confederates probably going to be happy with that as the campaign wraps up. Well, PGT Beauregard is finishing this campaign the way that he started it, which is all over the place and everywhere, and seeming to direct units and command traffic very effectively. He reassigned to a brigade from his division down here. That has put 9 strength points here against potentially Franklin's brigade here, which under these, and McDowell, which under these particular entrenchments would make it a 1-to-1 attack. Which could, there's a creek there. There's a creek hex side right here. But again, just trying to find victory points wherever they can get it to seal the win. And these units are fresh, so there's no reason not to. If assuming that we would be continuing this campaign or trying to drive the Union all the way back to Washington, D.C., that seems like something that Beauregard would do if he's got fresh troops. And so he is going to try it if the Confederates can win another initiative roll here. Otherwise, we'll probably see McDowell fall back from this road here. Also, I should also note up here that Hunter, is it Hunter? Yeah, Hunter. He did successfully move up along this road in the shadow of the Army of the Shenandoah, which is here. It did incur a manpower loss, which is not what he wanted because of the extended march, because of these units and how just demoralized and blown they are. But he is now in Loudoun County, which is going to give the Union the victory points they need for controlling it, assuming he ends the game there. There is still an opportunity for Johnston to make an attack, but Johnston's units are not in the best shape, and even if he does make the attack, that could just push push Hunter further into Loudoun County, and he doesn't want that. So we may just be, you know, happy with kind of where we're at up here. Hunter's not really a threat, even if he does recover to Johnston's forces. And the Union cavalry here is screening any sort of march to the east. So not really much to be done, especially given the road network. The only place that Johnston can go without really suffering from some disorganization would be down south this way, where the road's already clogged up. So the Army of the Shenandoah has done their job. They came in really rapidly from the north. They fought back the Union advance. They closed down Tyler's little adventure towards Camp Pickens and essentially helped the Confederates win the day. So let's see who gets the next initiative here. That's going to be the Confederacy, and so we are going to have an assault from PGT Beauregard here on this position here. So we're going to roll the dice. He is a overall leader, so we're going to subtract 2 from this roll. He needs to roll under a 4. He rolls a 6. Unfortunately, that -2 is a 4, which means no one can do the assault. Again, the Confederates having trouble getting their units to line up and play with each other as a team. And again, one of the interesting points of this system is that, you know, you get everything lined up, you get ready to go, and some factor that you are unsure about causes a snafu. And that is why I really like operational games. I was watching a video today on Mark Herman's YouTube channel about the upcoming Pacific War, and there's a fair amount of that kind of stuff that can happen in that as well. And I love that. I love the unpredictability. It makes for a really good solo experience because you don't know what's going to happen. It tells a story. And you know, makes for some memorable moments. That all being said, Beauregard can try again if the Confederates win initiative, and they do. So Beauregard's going to launch another assault. He's going to try it again. Why not? It's final turn of the game. He rolls a 3, -2 is a 1. That's going to allow him to assault with all of these units. I will give them some fatigue here, and I will tell you what happens from that combat. Well, Beauregard gets lucky enough, thanks to the modifier from the panicked Union Army. He does manage to just push and dislodge McDowell from the hex and advance. McDowell's got to go 2. He's got to go he can go here. That would probably be where he would go. Up to 2. He can go more. But yeah, you know, Beauregard on this final turn, just an absolute monster. Look at how he's opened the way here. The Union Army really scattered and separated, and the Confederates, if they had any more forces, they could kind of exploit this. But as it is, both sides have kind of fought themselves to exhaustion. I'm going to take a look at what possibly could happen next. There's really not a lot left. Most of the major forces on the map have moved. There's a lot of entrenched positions that don't want to move. And in fact, you know, no one side or the other is not really going to assault either of them. We may be at the end here. I'm going to take a once over on the map, and then I'll come back. And if it is the end, we'll take a look at the action, and I'll have my final thoughts on this campaign. And I was right. Finally, at last, we have come to the end. At the end of July 28th, excuse me. The Manassas, or the Bull Run campaign is over. First Manassas is over. And the ultimate result of all this is that it was a crushing Union defeat. Decisive victory by every metric for the Confederates. The biggest, obviously, thing that affected that being that there are no Union units in Prince William County other than this one down here. And so the Union not getting the bulk of their points, which they either needed to control or be in Prince William County. And the final counter thrust by the Confederates really just drove them kind of off the map. And plus the losses that the Union suffered at the end here. You know, at the end of the game, we've got 28 losses for the Union versus 13 for the Confederates, more than double. That victory point spread was insurmountable. Ultimately, the fact that the Union Army panicked as well, insurmountable. So, yeah, the Confederates did a really good job. They held, they bent, they didn't break. And they recovered and were able to drive a dagger right through the heart of the Union forces here on the northern end of the river. All in all, I think a really interesting story, a really interesting narrative, and I think pretty historical given everything that happened here. We sort of got the historical outcome we wanted, even if some of the paths we took to get there were not necessarily so. Whether it was the opening, you know, the opening advance by the Union down here, or the Confederate counter thrust. Really interesting game, really interesting system. I feel like if I set this up and played again, it would happen differently. Even if we got the same result, it would happen very differently. I've learned some things about how to take control the Union, how to attack better, and maneuver better to get those good attacks. And so there was some luck involved as well. Obviously, Johnston coming down with the Army of the Shenandoah so quickly really stalled out the Union advance. And I feel, there were so many times when we had Union units right at the cusp of taking, assaulting Camp Pickens and potentially taking the Confederate supply depot, and they just couldn't see it through. They just couldn't get it over the finish line on multiple occasions. And then the Union got greedy, right? We had Tyler come across the river. He came all the way down here, was parked here, but didn't have quite the strength to attack. The Confederates did a really good job of collapsing and rallying to the home base. And at that point, the Army of the Shenandoah had come in here and cut Tyler off, and that really was the death knell of the Union offensive. Once Tyler was out of supply and he couldn't recover and he couldn't get reinforcements, the Confederacy basically owned this game, and they owned it in a big way. I mean, if we had gone a couple more turns, the Confederacy was poised to sweep basically the army all the way back to D.C. And so this is where we stand. This is what the battlefield looks like. Obviously the South didn't see much fighting once both sides sort of, we had a little bit of a crossing here from Heintzelman's division, and he was in here. He held in there quite a bit, but the counterattack from Beauregard and the division down here really, that again was another great moment where the Confederacy was bowed, but then they came back with a vengeance and managed to push the Union back across here in these woods, and that led to sort of this stalemate here with these entrenchments. Overall, just a really cool system, a really fun game. Really happy I played this. I don't feel as exhausted as I did at the end of my Sicily campaign, primarily because this is much more playable than OCS, and playable in different ways. The Fog of War here is so enjoyable as a solo player. You don't know how far your units are going to move. You don't know if assaults are going to go off. And that's also present in the face-to-face game as well, but it just makes for a really compelling experience where you're kind of turning the pages of a book, right? You kind of know the general trajectory of the narrative, but you are unsure what the outcome is going to be. And so it keeps you playing. It keeps you hooked into the experience, versus an OCS is pretty deterministic, right? As the Americans in that game in Sicily, I knew how far I could move and who I was going to attack, and there was really nothing the Germans, could do to necessarily tactically counterattack there or respond to. But here it's like, if a unit doesn't get enough movement points, or they extended march and take some losses, or they become disorganized, like all of that changes the moment-to-moment gameplay. And so you're always sort of standing on shifting sand when it comes to, how you're going to execute your plans. And I love that about operational games. We saw that a little bit too with Antony and Cleopatra, another sort of strategic operational game where a lot of unexpected things can happen and sort of throw a wrench into a spanner into the works, as the Brits would say. But overall, as my first experience to a real, full campaign length scenario for great campaigns of the American Civil War, this was fantastic. Cannot recommend this system highly enough. I've talked at length about all the things I like about it, but just to summarize some of that stuff, it's emergent. The gameplay is emergent. It has a real operational feel to it. Combat, you're not making tactical decisions about combat. You're making maneuver decisions to lead you into combats where you think you have an advantage, but you may not. And I think that really models the fog of war of combat really well, and it makes attacking really risky. I like the command rules. I like the fact that commanders can't always pull off what they want to do. And I like a lot of the stuff that was introduced into this campaign scenario specifically. I like the variable weather. I think that was an interesting moment in this campaign where, everything slowed down because no one could cross rivers and the movement was really slow. I really liked the command paralysis. Yeah, I didn't show you on camera, but the Confederates in the last, 3 turns of the game, I think 2 of them, they had command paralysis where if they won initiative with a 6, they actually didn't win initiative, they lost it. And that, affected some things as well. Certain Union units were able to move and get out of danger because of that. So all in all, just a lot to like here, a lot to enjoy, a lot to unpack, super replayable. And like I've said, the amount of game in this box is insane. I mean, I just did the first modules campaign. That took me, the better part of 3.5 weeks of, not constant playing. I was playing off and on, and I played another game in there. But 15-turn campaign, it really felt like a marathon, and in a good way. And there's a whole nother module that uses both maps for the Cedar Mountain campaign. Stonewall Jackson's Way campaign is what it's called. And, I want to play that. That would be what happens directly after this. I believe 1862. So just a fantastic system all around. It does so many things right. From a negative standpoint, I think really your tolerance for counter manipulation, having to constantly add and subtract fatigue markers with these tiny counters, it's really going to come down to whether or not you're able to play games with tweezers, because you're going to need them. There's really no getting around the fact that the hexes are small, the counters are small, and you're going to have these big stacks of markers and stuff like that. It's the only thing that I don't like about this is the heavy manipulation and dexterity required to play it. But if you can get past that, there's an amazing game to be found here. All of the systems work really well together. You can tell this is a system that's been polished over the decades, and just really genius and brilliant in a lot of ways, from whether it is the maneuver or the combat or the chrome or the way that leaders function, or how in different games in different years of the Civil War you get sort of different capabilities. Obviously in this one, leaders only have a command range of 2, right? So that really limited where you can make your assaults and grand assaults, and had to, in the first video you saw me have to set up carefully to make that. But in future games you've got things like where command radius is actually 3, and that gives you so much more flexibility over your divisions, where leaders can command units from further away. You've got special abilities like Stonewall Jackson in Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 just gets an automatic +1 whenever he assaults. You saw that in my video on Cedar Mountain. So you get these really interesting asymmetric capabilities amongst the sides of the game, and that changes the sort of dynamics as well. So all in all, I really cannot recommend anyone who's interested in hex and counter war games, or the Civil War, or even if you're not interested in the Civil War but you want operational hex and counter, to check out Great Campaigns of the American Civil War as a system. It is so fantastic. One of my just most serendipitous and appreciated discoveries in the world of wargaming that I think I've ever had, and it's worth a look. There's some overhead here with the rules. It's not the most complicated game, but the rules make it seem complicated because they're so wordy. But there is a good good game in this system that just came out called Hood Strikes North. That's about the Tennessee campaign of 1864, sort of the final Confederate offensive of the Civil War. It's one map. It's got a handful of grid scenarios. It's got a campaign scenario. I think that one's 32 turns, so it's pretty long. But that's a really good one if you're looking to get into the system. It's affordable. Actually, let me grab it real quick. I'll be right back. So here it is right here. It's affordable, and I picked it up after I started playing this system because I knew I would love it. It's affordable. It's got the latest edition of the rules. It is one map. It is 2 counter sheets, and this is probably a really good spot to learn the system rather than one of the larger games. You do get more value for your money in something like Stonewall Jackson's Way or Road to Gettysburg, but this is probably the best way to learn the system if you're not quite sure if you're going to enjoy it. This is a heavier weight war game. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot going on here, but it's not as complex, in my opinion, as OCS, and I think it really evokes the period in a way that most other war games don't, really the peculiarities of the period. So that is my sort of take now that I've sort of had a little bit of everything that the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War has to offer. A learning scenario that was 1 turn, a longer scenario that allowed for some maneuver, and then a full campaign where we got sort of the maneuvering of armies, the meeting of the engagement, the entrenched battles, and then the counterattack. All of that was extremely enjoyable, and this is one of my favorite systems. As you saw in my recent Arrivals video that I did before I left on vacation, I own now every modern game in this system, and I fully plan to play all of them because there's a lot of enjoyment to be had here. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Bull Run campaign from Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, the Battles of Bull Run. This was the campaign from the first module. The next time I play this series, I don't know when that will be for the channel, it will be the Stonewall Jackson's Way campaign scenario. That's going to use both maps. I got to figure out where I'm going to put that and leave it set up for me to be able to play it. But that one also looks like a ton of fun. And yeah, I hope you'll join me for that as well. If there's any questions you have about Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, especially for the perspective of someone who's new to it and who's discovering it with a lot of joy, I'm happy to answer that. Or if you want to talk about anything in the comments here, feel free to leave some comments below. I think more visibility on this series is going to be a good thing, and I'm happy that I now have some people I know that I can teach it to and play it with moving forward. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you for the resumption of Ancient August as we move into September.